Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll share.
Oh god,
Oh no! I
oh
was not expecting that.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Satisfactory News. When it comes to power grid management, the efforts of many Satisfactory players, myself included, is lacking. We make sure that our entire power grid is connected all together so we can see number go up, and then maybe we set up priority power switches, setting power generators at the most important, their supporting factories just below them, and everything else at lowest priority. But I'm sure we've all been there. A fuse gets blown, we hear that terrible sound effect, and we go on a massive side quest to find out where the problem is. Once we do find it, we have to make a janky solution to jumpstart the grid again. If you're lucky, you prepared, and you bought yourself a few hours by building power storage. But regardless, your entire world is at risk of collapse. So today, I have a guest on the channel, a viewer who goes by MS8 Studios. He works in the power industry as a lineman for a major utility company, and knows a thing or two about how real-world power systems are built, and why they're built that way. So in this video, we're going to show you how you can apply real-world logic, including backup systems, separated grids, and more flexible setups to your Satisfactory power management. And maybe you'll even learn something about the power lines and substations that you see out in the real world.
Hey guys, MS8 Studios here. I'm here with Satisfactory News. We're going to be giving you a tutorial today on realistic power line construction, or grid management, as we call it. As my professional career, I do line work for a utility company, so I'm very familiar with line construction, grid management, switching, reclosing, all that sort of thing. So we're going to try to keep this as close to realistic as possible. Obviously, there's limitations in the game. There's a few mods that'll be in the description that might help you with setting up your own grid management, but if you want to do it with the base game, it's perfectly feasible. So what I generally do for starting is I look at how I want to phase. Phasing is separating your load into three separate or multiple phases that are run by different generators. You can have multiple generators on one phase, and you can just run one phase all throughout your world. The problem you're going to run into with that is when you've got buildings that have a lot of load, factories, let's say, especially mid-game, where you start having problems with energy management. Phasing helps you to split that load. So you can build one phase with one generator or two generators that run just one or two factories. And if that generator overloads, you lose that phase. You don't lose your entire world. You don't lose your entire factory.
I think a lot of the conventional wisdom of Satisfactory is that we combine our grids because it's just easier to look at one number instead of having to, address a bunch of different separated power grids. But what you're suggesting is basically to make a bunch of little power grids so that it's easier to manage.
Well, the issue you run into that is, especially mid-game, it becomes very tedious trying to track down where your power outage is. So I know a lot of people who've played this game, and especially a lot of YouTubers I've watched, all they see on the edge of the screen is a fuse has blown. And then they're sitting there freaking out wondering, oh my God, I don't know where this fuse is at, I don't know how I can backfeed this or how I can ramp up power production for this. Well, instead of having to worry about that, now you're going to go back and you're going to say, okay, which phase is this on? Which device is this on? While it may seem like it makes it more complicated, in all actuality, this isolates your problems to very specific areas. It's sectionalizing your grid to save you long-term heartache. So your production backup is limited only to that specific area. Any three-phase service you have is going to be for a machine of some sort.
So basically, three-phase, perfect for Satisfactory.
Three-phase is perfect for Satisfactory because everything is a machine. Obviously, the game doesn't get that intricate as far as phasing and things of that nature. I really wish it did, or at least had the option to, but you work with what you've got. They get into a very basic concept of it when they introduced the priority power switches, but this aims to take it a step further for those of you who are interested in true power management, trying to make sure that you're not losing your whole world or even big factories if you overload something. I know capacitors tend to help with that a lot, but they're fairly expensive in game, so you don't really want to have to sink all your money into capacitors just to meet demand. Alright, so to get started on basic power line construction, you are gonna want to start with a painted beam. So for a single phase pole, you're going to run up about 15 meters. This is all you're going to need here. You're going to go over to power, pick a Mark III wall outlet for your primary, and a Mark I wall outlet for your neutral. This is what you'd refer to as a dead end pole. It's a single phase pole where the line ends or begins. Generally, this is going to be for end of line applications. You're not going to place this in the middle of the line unless you got a very hard angle that you're trying to take. So something like where this pole's doing here, where you've got a buck arm off here. This would be a hard angle where you would dead end, come up, and come across. This is what you'd refer to as a straight line pole. These poles are going to carry the line, as it says, straight through. You're going to make sure you've got a fair separation between your neutral and your primary insulator. In situations like this, where you have low line clearance, meaning you couldn't really fit a pole in here without it looking awkward, or in real life this would not give us the clearance to build a pole. But in the instance you have to build something back here and you don't have clearance for a pole for reasons like this, you can do alley arm construction. The pole would come up here and your arm would come out from the pole. Instead of being even on the pole, it comes off to one direction. This allows you to maintain line clearance and tight spaces. You can see how the tap line comes off of this pole. This, realistically, what you're looking at here would be a cutout. It's the thing you see at the top of the pole. It looks like it's kind of, it's got a thing that hangs down from it. If it's hanging down, it's open, you don't have power flowing through that, and that's probably the reason your power's out. This is what we'd refer to as a transformer pole. You can see you got the H1, which is the high 1 bushing on the top. That takes primary in. The coils on the inside step the primary down to a residential voltage, which will be 2 phases of 120 volts each, which combine to make 240 for larger appliances. You got your neutral on the top here, 120 and 120. This is what we'll refer to as a recloser for the purpose of this video. Reclosers are your first line of defense. When you have an issue out in the field, these are your ultimate protective devices aside from fuses. Your recloser carries a lot of customers. They're set in key areas along the grid to try and protect upline devices. An upline device is something we use to refer to like another recloser, which is feeding more customers, or if you go all the way back to the substation, your breaker would be the upline device. The recloser reports to the breaker reports to your transformer protecting device, and from that it goes over to transmission. You want to set your circuit priority with substation transformers in priority group 1, your breakers in priority group 2, your first set of reclosers in priority group 3, second set of reclosers in priority group 4, and so on and so forth, up until you reach your internal panel breakers and stuff like that. So panel breakers would be just like in your home, something of that nature. This is a panel breaker for literally just feeding this one building. You can see how I have it routed here. All 3 phases are separated. They're colored down here because electricians. They run throughout this whole building. You can see we've lost a phase. So we have 1 phase in this building, or possibly 2 phases that have no power going through them. And you can see how I've got the load split. The reason you split the load, like we mentioned before, is so you're not overloading one device. One protective device going out shouldn't mean the entire world loses power, or an entire section of your world loses power. So to break that down into simple terms, you have too much load coming out of this building here. Well, ideally, it would trip those breakers. If it doesn't, it should trip the recloser. And if the recloser trips, that means your breaker and your substation transformer are not going to trip. So the rest of your world that's fed off of this substation is still energized. If it ends up being something that overloads between the first recloser and the breaker, your breaker should trip. Once your breaker trips, you've lost power on that phase from the substation onwards. And at that point, you need to get in here and figure out what's going on between the breaker and the first recloser. The purpose of your recloser is to, like I said, protect both your upline devices like the breakers, substation transformers, poles, anything of that nature, and to effectively isolate the grid in terms of a fault. Switches, I've got a tie switch here, means that you can either isolate a part of the grid or it can be backfed from another area. So a perfect example of this is this buck line here comes all the way out here. bucks off of this pole, goes over here to a midline tap switch. This switch is open, meaning there's no power being fed through this switch. So these lines back here, theoretically, would be fed from another direction, either the same device, upline, or another device. If it's the same device or the same phase, it'll come up through here. This line will be hot all the way up to the switch. Let's say this pole here breaks for some reason. Car hits it, tree falls on it, pole gets old, any number of things. Let's say this pole breaks, all these lines break, and they're laying on the ground. What you do at the power company, you come over here, or contractors even, you'll cut this jumper here, cut this one here, and cut this one here. You'd go back to the switch, you'd throw the switch in, operating it, and now you've energized everything up to this pole here. This pole is isolated. You would do the same thing at this pole. You would cut all the jumpers there, all the lines coming up from the feeder circuit, and you would heat everything back up, make it energized up to this point. So you don't lose any customers except for what may be on this pole here, which in this case is nothing. Switching is very effective for in situations where you want to isolate. So in a situation like that, you'd be isolating a broken or damaged part of the grid. It's helpful if you've got load imbalance, too much load coming in for the line to handle it. You can backfeed it from another direction if the phases are the same and increase the load capacity. Double and triple circuit construction is something you want to pay attention to, like here. You notice the difference between these two poles is this one only has 3 lines on it, not including the neutral. You come over here, this one has 9. So that's 3 separate circuits. You've got the 301, the 302, and the 303 in this case. All of them are carrying different phases, so none of these have the same generator. The reason you do this is if you've got areas coming out of substations, like right here or over there, and they have a massive amount of load on them. So you're feeding hundreds or thousands of customers off of triple circuit construction, and you want to build in a way like this that allows phase clearance. These phases, real life, cannot touch. They will short circuit, they will knock the line out and damage equipment. They can burn houses down, all of that. Naturally, this is not going to be ideal for late game. Late game, you're going to have all your power needs met. Early and mid game is where you want to focus on phasing. This will set you up so, as I mentioned earlier in the video, you won't lose power to large sections of the map. You won't have to go do a lot of troubleshooting because you've got protective devices set up, like I do here, and you've got their priorities set to where, you know, okay, so let's say we're going to follow the 303. Let's do the 301. So A phase 301, okay, you go from the A phase 301 to ABC phase 301 R1, first recloser. So then you've got this, the A, B, and C phase 301 T1 R1. So the T1 R1 means it's a tap phase. So you can see they've all got their different priorities. Hopefully at this point you know how to use priority power switches. But for the purpose of what I'm explaining to you here, your tie switches are going to be lowest priority, because they're going to be open most of the time anyways. In the event that you do close them, you want to make sure that your load is going to be lower than your generation capacity or your capacitor capacity. I think that's about everything I have to cover here. Hopefully I answered any questions y'all might have. Hopefully I gave you some ideas as far as, you know, managing your power, building how you want to build, and still managing a effective grid without causing any further problems for you. And yeah, I look forward to seeing some of y'all's builds.
So to kind of sum up everything that you've said, obviously this looks pretty overwhelming for a lot of people. Not everyone needs to go this deep or this realistic, but the point of all of this is essentially, like you said, early game, mostly to mitigate the damage that a power outage will cause and make it easier to take down and upgrade existing infrastructure without blowing a grid.
The point of this is to make it easier on you. So you're not going out and you're not saying, okay, I've got everything fed off of one line. I've got 100 generators on that line, but everything's fed off of one line. So a single outage, a single fuse being tripped might knock out half of your factory, which is obviously mind-boggling. That's a big issue. It causes a production backup, it locks up some of your devices and factories, and now you've run into a problem where you've got to go through and manually fix some of your fluid and assembly line flows. Essentially, it's allowing for more tedious power management. While it's initially more difficult to set up, it does make maintenance and outage management a lot easier for you. Especially, another example, if you're rebuilding your factory, as I know everybody's done in this game, if you're rebuilding a major part of your factory and you know for a fact you're going to have to reroute your power, switching in the idea of this allows you to just backfeed it from another direction. So you're like, okay, everything past this switch is going to be knocked out up to, like, let's say the 3rd floor. All right, so you've got a alternate feed that comes down from like the 6th floor. Now you can turn that switch on, backfeed everything down there, and you can knock out everything on the 3rd floor and not have to worry about a large outage because you've isolated that. It all depends on what you're wanting to do. You can do something a lot more basic than this for your own purposes if you don't want to be that into it in the world, or you could be as advanced as I am on it. This is just coming from real world experience that I have in the power industry. Things are this complex. They really are. You've got multiple different protection devices. You've got multiple different switching areas. There's so many different ways you can do something. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, almost everyone playing this game, whether it's with coal power or nuclear power, has had a problem where their grid has been blown and they can't get the power to come back online because, water extractors take time to ramp up and they can't get water to the coal generators in time, and the grid just keeps failing and failing, and it's just an endless loop that you have to come up with some crazy backup. You have to build a whole other power generation system just to get your main grid back online.
Absolutely. I know I've had that problem too. And that's something you just gave me an idea of too. Now, let's say you phased your entire world, right? Everything's rolled between 3 to 9 to however many phases you've got set up. Well, not only that, you can have your generation facilities or your generation required facilities, such as oil pumps, refineries, things of that nature that are specifically feeding your generators. They have their own dedicated power generation. So, and you might have backups for that. So let's say your primary generation goes out for that and you're like, oh no, I've just lost my refinery that's refining the fuel for this generator. Oh, that's okay. I've got a coal plant in the other direction. I've got a switch between here and there. I throw that switch. Now I'm backfed from that direction. That makes it a lot easier on you because now you don't have to worry about it.
Okay, well, awesome. Thank you so much for spending the time to educate us all about both real-world power systems and also how that can be applied to Satisfactory to make our games and power grids a little more manageable.
Absolutely. If y'all have any ideas for how you think this could be better managed, then feel free to let me know.
Yep, and if you still have questions after watching this, drop them in the comments and I will try to reply to as many of them as possible. Send them over, get a good answer. Thank you again for your time, and thank you everybody else for watching this video. I know it was a pretty chunky one, but I think you will have learned a lot from it. We recorded a bunch more content for this video that didn't quite make the cut, so if you do want to see more content like this, go ahead and watch the bonus video, which will be linked at the end and in the comments down below. In that video, you'll find more about MS8's world and how it's set up, the mods that it uses, and how to build reclosers. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to Satisfactory News. Or if you want, you can watch one of these suggested videos that's up on your screen right now.